Now, speaking of selling things, maybe we should spend some time talking about like another topic that I think is really interesting in terms of where Artifact is going, and also where Prismata is right now. And it's a subject that I think is becoming more and more prominent in within card game, like discussion circles and just gaming in general. And that's about economy, business models, and monetization. Um, and I think a good place to start with this is actually just a quote that I found from your website, which I think is useful to give your opinions on the subject of it. Um, Prismata is a genuinely free to play game. Prismata will contain over 40 free single player missions, and our never to pay to win multiplayer modes will be freely available to all players. To fund Prismata's continued expansion, we will offer ethical microtransactions to help unlock cosmetic items, like equipable skins and emotes, that provide no competitive advantage. Prismata will be kept free from the annoyances that plague so many so-called free-to-play games. Our motto is simple: no pay to win, no grinding, and no bullshit. So tell me about what kind of came into crafting that statement, because it clearly has some games in mind that you might be kind of criticizing in there.
Yes. I mean, at the time, there were still a lot of like Facebook games like I don't know, Farmville and Zynga Poker and shit like that, which were these glorified
Skinner boxes, yeah.
they're not even really games. They're just experiences where you just deposit money and that's it. And they use these mechanics of social envy and forcing you to wait and all these things to make you put in money. We don't have any of that crap, and we don't have pay to win. Now, and when we say pay to win, we think of Hearthstone as a pay to win game. Like when we say pay to win, we mean being able to pay for an advantage, regardless of whether you can also grind for that advantage, right? In Hearthstone, when you're grinding, you're earning 50 cents a day plus 15 cents an hour or something like that.
That's about
different
right.
people have done the math in different ways, but it's, yeah. And it's like, it's frustrating if you want to actually be a free to play player. The dust system, for example, makes it very difficult to switch decks. There's all kinds of mechanics in there that are encouraging people to spend money and making the gameplay a little bit miserable for people who want to do it via budget or free. And we think, let me put it this way. A big part of Hearthstone's success is on day one deceiving you about the true cost of playing and experiencing the game. Because if you are, say you've never played Hearthstone before and Hearthstone just comes out and you think, okay, I'm going to get into this card game. And you invest a little bit, you open some packs, whatever. Like, you don't realize that, the good decks cost $100 or more than $100 in some cases. You don't realize the amount of packs that you have to open. And if you want to build a good deck right away, you're going to have to do all this dusting and actually lose value on the packs that you've opened. So it encourages you to spend even more so you don't have to do too much dusting in order to build the decks you want to build. There's all these insidious mechanics relating to the monetization that make the true cost of the game much higher. And there's a lot of players that have sort of, if they knew that they'd be spending $1,000 on this card game, they never would have started playing on day one, right? And I think like the standard that we always have for ourselves is like, are we ever being disingenuous to our player base? Like if our player base knew our 100% business model from the top, like, would they still want to start playing on day one? And if to me, if the answer is no, then I feel that you're doing something wrong and you're being a little bit unethical. And Hearthstone manages to toe that line very closely. Every once in a while there'll be a post on Reddit where people get super upset about it. But as a business that's trying to optimize their profits, they're doing a good job of towing that line. But it's like, whenever their design team, for example, is answering questions, they always have to have this shit-eating grin on of never mentioning the money, right? Never mentioning the true reason why they're not nerfing all this stuff is because they don't want to undermine people's confidence in their purchases, right? There are all these reasons that they make certain design decisions that are based around the game's economy. And they can't talk about any of that publicly, right? So people just are left to speculate and argue and, I find it's very disingenuous because there's a gap between what they're saying and what's actually happening behind the curtain, right? And that's true for all of these free-to-play businesses that rely on their sketchy business models of doing nefarious things to get you to open their wallets, right? And our point is, like, I'm the developer. You guys are the customers. I will tell you exactly what we're doing, exactly why we're doing it, exactly how it works. And, if you have any complaints, just tell me and I'll answer them, right? We're not afraid to have real talk about that shit. But you can't do that if you're doing what Hearthstone does. You can't.
Well, so it is something that you probably aren't aware of this. I've written extensively on card game economics. Like, I actually have a video out that just came out recently that's on the economics of Magic the Gathering Arena, and doing computations for expected deck prices and in terms of both like number of games that days you have to play to grind these decks, or how much it would cost to purchase these decks. Like doing all the calculations behind that. I did a comprehensive one about a year ago, almost a year and a half ago now, that was comparing Hearthstone, Eternal, Gwent.
I may have read some of your articles. I mean,
really?
I'm not
wow.
Sure,
okay.
But I tend to read that shit.
Yeah, so that was it was a big project. It was really well received, but it's something that so where it all actually started was somebody who had as I mentioned earlier, I think I started off by doing content in Eternal, and somebody mentioned in chat somewhere is Hearthstone's cheaper than Eternal, and I was like, that sounds wrong to me by a lot. So, and it's one of those questions that there's an answer to. You can do the math, and so I did the math and just spent trying to figure out how long would it take to grind decks in terms of how many game wins, and then how much would it cost functionally to purchase these decks. And I since then tried to kind of follow the topic because I think it's so fascinating, and especially partly because of what you're saying too, is that to varying degrees, I think some of these companies kind of shield part of the secret sauce that's going on behind the veil. Because one of the things that you see with Hearthstone is that in order to grind competitive level decks and have a diversity, actually have a handful of different competitive decks, you basically have to be playing several hours a day, including a good amount of arena, constant. You do play probably, I would guess, 3 hours a day at least. Including a 60% or higher win rate in arena to consistently be keeping up with the meta. That's just not realistic.
And of course,
for people.
You have to be playing fast decks, because if you play slow decks, it's going to take you even longer.
Oh yeah, that's another thing too. It's a really brutal business model. So if you actually look at it from that lens, it's like could somebody realistically keep up with the costs of the game and keeping up with meta defining decks without paying any money? Could a player who's paying average of 2 hours a day and of average skill level, could they be keeping up with the meta defining decks? If the answer is no, I don't think that your game is free to play. You say that it is, I actually just don't think that it is. This is one of the reasons why I really like Eternal, because if you actually do the math, it's yeah, you do have to put in some work, and money does accelerate the process, but I think that it actually does meet that criteria.
Well, here's the issue. Hearthstone has such a strong first mover advantage in the market. And their product it has this stickiness feature, which means that once your customers start using your product, they want to stick with that product, right? Because
the cost fallacy is huge.
You can't sell your Hearthstone collection and move over to another game. And I think what Valve is doing with Artifact and their business model is very smart in this regard, because who wants to start playing a new card game now that you've played Hearthstone? Well, in Artifact, you can sell your cards if you don't want them again. So suddenly, there's less of an issue with investing into a new product, because if you don't like it, you can just sell it off. And I think, Valve is probably the only company that's both big enough and has enough experience with sort of the trading economies required to implement that sort of thing, that they can actually create a product that will convince people to play it. And for them, I think it's kind of the only way they could have competed with Hearthstone, because if they tried to make a similar business model where, again, people have to put hundreds of dollars into it and they can't get that $100 back, it just wouldn't have worked. So I think they're doing the right thing. I could talk lots more about that.
Oh no, no, I want to hear lots more about that. But so it's something that, for instance, I don't know if you like saw it today, but there was some like a few more pieces of information that kind of came out about the economy, and it like it really does seem like like this they're aiming for the upfront investment is not going to be that expensive, and being able to keep a deck is going to be it's not going to be very expensive to buy into the game, but it's but it is going to be something, as opposed to with Hearthstone, the initial buy-in is technically nothing, but to keep up, you have to pay a lot.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, like, when they said, it won't be free to play, if they had said it'll be just like Hearthstone, except when you play, you get no rewards, like, people wouldn't have seen it as a good thing. Mm-hmm. But somehow they're saying, oh, it won't be free to play. People are perceiving it as a good thing. I think people are mistakenly believing that, like, they're going to get access to all the heroes for free, or they're going to get all the cards for free, or it's going to be like an LCG.
Yeah, there are definitely some people who I think are having creative imaginations in how to interpret these things. Like, it's still going to cost money to have a collection, etc. I think there's just a question also of, like, I think that one of the things that you brought up is also just the kind of question of honesty, in this as well. Because I think that Artifact, at the very least, is being much more upfront about the fact it's like, yeah, no, we're not free to play. We're asking for your money. You just know that this is the cost of getting into the game, as opposed to Hearthstone that's trying to lure you into paying money and then, try to keep you around in this kind of abusive relationship.
It's just, whenever I see a headline on a website that's like, Artifact will not be free to play, whether or not that's a piece of clickbait is another thing. But I think that people read into it the wrong way. And I think that Valve has been quite clever in the way they've crafted the narrative around the product. When, in fact, if they just said, our business model will be very similar to Magic the Gathering's business model, then people would just be like, there'd be a collective sigh.
Yeah.
Whereas them saying, oh, it will not be free to play is somehow better. And I think people need to cool their excitement a little bit until they actually see the details. Because my understanding from reading about it and hearing what I've heard about it is that it's just going to be similar to what Magic the Gathering does. Very much like that. There'll be some kind of starter deck or starter pack, and then you buy packs and you can trade them.
Yeah, I think that it'll be very similar to Magic the Gathering Online, as opposed to not like Magic the Gathering Arena, because they have two programs, because both of them are bad. Trying to find one that's good. But anyway, that's a different thing.
Yeah. I have not paid so much attention to MTG Arena, but I am very familiar with the old MTG Online and, of course, Paper Magic.
Yeah. But the economy is going to be, in some respects, fundamental. Like I'm guessing right now, like, this is still like conjecture. It looks to be, though, like it has a lot of features similar to that of like Paper Magic or Magic the Gathering Online, which has a which has a trading based system. But as a people who are, I think, trying to optimistically frame things of like, oh, it's a living card game is another one that people think of, which is what Epic is. I haven't actually played Epic, but that's the game. Is that the other game I'm thinking of, or do you know this game at all? It's a living card game. That's like you.
There's a lot of them.
Okay, I haven't played very many of them. Anyway, it's a game that you buy all the cards. Like you buy into the game. It's like, oh, whatever it is, $60 or whatever, and you just you have all the cards now. And that's just how it is. So that's interesting. That they're kind of going with this route, the trading thing. And I think that you're very much right that Valve is one of the few companies that has the horsepower to pull off the economy of this,
the back end of the well, like, because here's the thing, right? If you have trading and you also can grind for the cards, then you can't avoid inflation. Oh yeah, right. So if they want to have trading, which they need because they want to get new players, then you can't have grinding, right? It can't be the case that you can earn a pack a day by playing for free or whatever. Like, maybe they'll have some small bits of free giveaways, but they can't have the same type of treadmill that Hearthstone has, because it's just going to inflate the value of the cards to nothing. They
imagine what would exactly
they want to preserve.
Well,
that
what would happen immediately is let's say that you had the Hearthstone model of a pack a day of free content of whatever it is, 30 wins. People are just going to set up botnets, that they're just going to be playing online every day and switching between accounts as soon as they get to their maximum, and then selling those online, and then everything's going to drop. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even if the bot, if it costs $20 to create a new account or whatever, it's
but I mean, also there'd be a lot of inflation things. So the idea that there's going to be the cost of the cards and the cost of the decks is going to be just really very closely linked to the packs themselves is something that I don't think people kind of appreciate almost the simplicity of it. It's just you buy packs, and that's kind of just the economy because you're and you trade them amongst one another.
I mean, that's what Magic has been
exactly.
for 20 years. I don't really think it's. I mean, there are some people who've played Hearthstone and have not played Magic, so you know.
I just think that there's a lot of speculation that I'm seeing that seems to be kind of envisioning a more creative and crazy sort of solutions like that. When
well, something that Valve has done for a decade or more is monetized very lightly their biggest products, right? If you know Dota 2, Team Fortress, whatever, like those products for a decade or more were not designed to make Valve money. They were designed as loss leaders for the Steam platform. Now, maybe they're not like loss leaders in that they're losing money, but Steam definitely under monetized a lot of those products relative to the total size of their audiences and the total amount of captivation they were getting. And I think people have sort of thought, oh, Valve's games are so nice. They're actually free and legit, and you only pay for cosmetics. But now that Valve has become, you know, a market dominating force in terms of an online marketplace, they don't care about getting more people onto their platform through their games. Like right now, you know, PUBG is the type of shit that's getting more people onto Steam. So I think that we're going to start to see Valve, you know, they've said they're going to start making games again, but the Valve games that come out are going to be monetized more aggressively. The level of aggressiveness of monetization is going to be more similar to what we're seeing in other games by, you know, the large publishers, Blizzard, whoever. You know, Valve games aren't going to be the cheap alternative anymore.
Interesting. I like that theory. That's an interesting one. Obviously, how it plays out. So I think that that's good on the economy, though. I think that, like, so overall, let's get your overall take of like what you think so far about what you've seen about the artifact economy. What's your impression?
I mean, I don't know. It's going to be trading. I foresee people like, you know, making lots of trading bots and having, you know, watching the markets very closely. There'll be people who just trade and don't play the freaking game at all. You know, I am interested to see how much friction there is. Like, is Valve going to take a 10% tax or 30% tax on every trade? They do in a lot of their other marketplaces, right? So like let's say you build a deck and it's you know a really solid deck, and then that deck goes out of the meta and you want to switch to another deck. Like, are you going to lose some value on the switch? You know, there are still some questions that I believe are unanswered. And I'm not going to make my judgment until I see the final version of it.
Okay, so that's good. So let's talk about some other ideas then related to Artifact. Some just different topics and see what your impressions are of them. So what are your thoughts on the hero mana system that they have developed? Anything about that you find particularly, you know, like interesting or good, bad, or whatever?
I think it's equally capable of producing interesting gameplay as most other mana systems. I'm sure they'll find interesting and unique ways to use it. It's hard to really say much more without knowing the sort of fine details. But like, it's fine. It doesn't strike me as there's going to be any problems with it.
What about the 3-lane system? Does that seem something that's interesting to you?
I worry about it for a couple of reasons. One is I think it will create the perception of the game as being very complex or very hardcore, and I think it will limit the appeal to casual players. Like, I understand Dota, 3 lanes, all that stuff. But like, when you look at, say, a streamer playing Artifact, are you going to be able to see what's going on all 3 lanes? Maybe they'll build some observer features, but ostensibly when you're watching a streamer, you're watching what they're seeing on their screen, and they're seeing one screen at a time. So you're not even seeing what else is going on, right? How playable is the game going to be? I think a lot of games, they create gameplay interestingness through just adding more and more complexity into the design. Like in Prismata, we take the approach of trying to make the most elegant mechanics that have the most interesting emergent gameplay. Whereas some other games like Pokemon, for example, if you play that competitively, it's just complexity. It's just more shit. Same as something like League of Legends or Dota. They just add more heroes, more abilities. To get good at the game, you have to be good at wrangling all the complexity of what's going on with 5 different heroes, 3 different lanes, all that stuff. And it's not so much about like thinking deeply as it is about just having a commanding understanding of all kinds of shit. And so I worry if Artifact is going a bit too far in that direction. Another thing is with the turns going back and forth between the two players multiple times per turn, like you're passing priority all the time. How capable will players be of actually wrangling the complexity? Like, the designers have said that, like, it's a game that's impossible to play perfectly. It's a game where the skill cap is unlimited and all that stuff. But that's not always a good thing if implemented in a way that just, like, blows your brain out. Are you going to be able to play this game for 10 hours without feeling exhausted, right? Hearthstone gives you lots of breaks. There's lots of easy turns. There's lots of downtime. There's all these questions that are yet unanswered about how it will actually feel to play the game. And we're not going to know until we get a chance to play
it. It is something that, like, in terms of what you're saying about the learning curve is I think kind of how you would describe it. Like, it is something that, if you're looking at Dota as the example, it's kind of like a notoriously complex game. And sort of deliberately so in some cases where there's just, variety of interactions and stuff like that. You're like, yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it works that way. But, sure.
Well, like, it's not just about the learning curve. It's about the physical experience of playing the game. Like, playing a game of StarCraft is exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
Like, I used to play a lot of StarCraft, and I'm the kind of guy who would stay up playing 12 hours of StarCraft in a night. And I realized that a very small fraction of gamers want to do that or are capable of doing that, or don't get completely blown out after an hour or two of it. So it's, as a game designer, you're always trying to manage the attention of your players and sort of the amount of glucose in their brains, right? At some point, players are just like, oh, I'm done, I need a break, right? And is Artifact going to push people to that limit quicker because it's such an overwhelming game?
Actually, on that topic, just back to Prismata for a moment. One of the things that you have in the game is like a turbo mode that it's like 6 seconds per turn or something like that, right? Like, how long can you play? So, like, people who haven't played this game, like, yeah, like, 6 seconds per turn, you're playing the game from beginning to end, and and just every decision has to be like super, super fast. And like, I've watched some of these games, and it's basically like, yeah, these players are playing this kind of randomly. It seems like, I don't know. How long can you play that game?
I have played best of 100s before of 6 second per turn Prismata. I'll just be like randomly on the ladder, and one of the other guys will be on and like, hey, you want to play best of 40? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. Like, a couple hours later, it's honestly, like, here's the thing about Prismata. We sort of saw this parallel to chess. And if you go online, Blitz chess is actually one of the most popular forms of chess. A lot of people play fucking 1 minute chess, which when you're learning chess as a newbie, that just seems insane. But once you get good at chess, you realize, okay, actually, I only have to move one thing per turn. I can kind of wrangle the complexity of the board. And the chess online environments provide all of these features like pre-moving and stuff like that that makes it easier. And also the way like lag reduction happens and all that's controlled. And so in Prismata, we added all these features to facilitate Blitz play. We have all these hotkeys. You can buy all the base set units with the left-hand keys on a keyboard. You can assign hotkeys to the purchasing units by dragging them up and down in the buy box. There's all this stuff we did. And as a consequence, you can play a game of Prismata at, some people even play 3 seconds per turn.
Really? Oh,
like,
God.
yeah.
Dear Lord. I like 20 seconds per turn. Like I played that one to some, and I have not even attempted faster than that because I know that I would just get demolished.
It's a very small fraction of our player base that enjoys that queue on the ladder, but we have it open and people do play it all the time.
Oh yeah, people who love it really love it. But
yeah, I mean we've discovered just gamers are so diverse in what they love and what they want to play. So we offer all of these different options, and we have a queuing system in our game that lets you queue up for tons of stuff at once. So if there's nobody playing Blitz, you can still just find a match. You don't have to only be in the Blitz queue.
No, that actually reminds me of something that I think it was just announced today about the Artifact. As I understand it, that the tournament structures that they're using is that there's a lot of freedom and people creating their own tournaments and having their own rules for it. So that like in some respects, like it kind of gets at what you're saying about is that you can develop these niche formats and you can generate like this sort of user generated content and push people towards maybe finding some niche of people who like Artifact maybe that has you have 4 seconds per turn or whatever it is.
Yeah, Valve is very big on that type of stuff. Just creating things that add value to their product. It kind of reminds me of like the PokerStars home games that were added, I don't know, 10 years ago, like a long time ago, but they decided to add make your own tournament on PokerStars. So we actually had it in our old alpha for a while. You can make your own Prismata tournament. And like it was a really janky feature. The implementation was poor. And we made it in 24 hours to try and see if anybody would use it. And it turned out that like people ended up just hosting tournaments on Challenge. And instead we implemented these kind of 1 hour, we call them Blitz Brawls or Warzone tournaments, which is just like play as many Blitz games in an hour. Whoever has the highest score at the end wins a prize. And we just have those on kind of a schedule. But yeah, we love tournaments, and there's all kinds of different stuff you can do with them. And I think Valve's doing it right by allowing people to make their own.
Yeah, I think that's one of the features that I'd like it if more and more game designers gave some of those tools to players, because it allows games to, like mature more. Like for instance, like one of the greatest successes with Hearthstone recently has been the like these dungeon run things that they've been doing recently. Like imagine how long ago those would have been created had there been custom game mode options in Hearthstone. Or I mean, also of course, like notoriously, like Dota was a mod of Warcraft 3. So like it's weird how in some respects some studios have been moving away from doing that kind of that freedom, but it just seems like it's such a good way to get really innovative stuff out there from players.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's difficult with something like Dungeon Run, because I think it's hard for a member of the community to develop that quality of content, say that people would be willing to pay for it. If it's free, whatever. But there's so many games. Like I think Valve had kind of not a great experience with Portal 2 when they had the ability to create your own levels in it, and they were garbage. Like you'd try and go in there and find interesting Portal 2 levels, and they'd be broken. They'd have unintended solutions, or they'd be impossible, or they'd just be complete trash. And I would say until like Super Mario Maker came around, there weren't that many good solutions. And even then, like if you try and find really good content on there, a lot of it's just being shared online through sort of specific locations or communities that share codes for like really good levels, as opposed to the stuff that you find within the game, which is all just memes and jokes for the most part. I don't know. I think like say single player content is very hard to have a community create on your behalf, whereas allowing the community to sort of just arrange their own multiplayer tournaments, I mean, that's something that's been a tradition for say shooter games for 20 years. You used to have to host your own Quake server, and you'd set up the custom rules for your server. So that to me makes perfect sense for a PC centered game focused on communities. So
Interesting. So, did you have any other thoughts about Artifact that you wanted to share?
I have some great stories which I haven't told yet.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, like we were very interested in Artifact for the reason of trying to like figure out when we're going to launch Prismata, because Prismata has kind of been almost ready for like a year, and we've been working on the early tutorial content, single player mode, stuff like that. And so we were thinking, okay, let's do an early access soft launch sort of winter spring this year, and then later we'll come out of free to play and do the full launch. And we were working with some streamers and some advertising partners, and we kept asking them, do you guys know anything about Artifact? Does anybody know when Artifact is actually going to get announced or is coming out or anything at all? And like we did talk to Life Coach, we did talk to some other streamers, and like they don't really say anything because they don't know either. And I remember I talked to a guy who we were doing some promotions with. He was doing some influencer marketing for us, and he like went down to Valve at some point and met with them, and he asked them, so when's Artifact coming out? These guys are planning on releasing a game this spring. They kind of want to know. And like I think Valve said to him, like, what's the date they have in mind? And he told us our early access launch date. And their response was, oh, they don't have to worry at all. Like, and it seemed to be the case that nobody at Valve even knew, right? It wasn't that Valve was just being tight-lipped for the sake of being tight-lipped. It seemed more like Valve just like they didn't genuinely know when it would be ready, and it's probably not ready. It's probably there's a whole bunch of things that still don't work in the game, and they're still working on it to try and bring it to that state where it's ready. And I think it's quite likely that they're going to do the same thing that Hearthstone does, where certain people get keys that they are allowed to play the game or stream the game for a while before the general public gets access, and that will help hype up the game. And so our strategy for Prismata has always been like, we really want to be a game that people try out while they're waiting for Artifact. And like, we've met a lot of freaking people who are sick of Hearthstone and want to move on to something else, and we always tell them, give Prismata a shot. Because it's radically different and you might find it very captivating. And like I said, Life Coach, he was sort of in hibernation. He didn't stream for like 6 months after he kind of toned down his Gwent participation. And then when Prismata came out, he streamed it like 240 hours in a month. And he's been involved with the Artifact beta, I think. I mean, I don't know if he's officially allowed to say, but I believe...
there are strong rumors suggesting that Life Coach is involved in the beta.
Nobody's allowed to say for sure. But
just as I've heard rumors about Stan Zifka as well.
And like I've talked to them both. Like Stan plays a ton of Prismata. He's played, probably several hundred hours. I don't know. I don't stalk these guys, but I regularly see them on the ladder.
I actually ran into Stan last night, and he showed me what a Pro Tour caliber player is made of. Let's just put it that way. Actually, 2 out of the 3 games that we played were kind of close. The third one was not remotely interesting.
Like we definitely seen a lot of especially these people who are kind of sick of Hearthstone and looking to move on to something else take up Prismata and really, really enjoy it. And we're like just getting started. We're just in this early access period. So I don't know, if you're looking for something new, it's a great time to jump in.
Well, I think that's a great place to end things. Elyot, it's been great chatting with you. This has been a lot of fun. So is there, how can people like find you, find out more about the game? Just
search Prismata on Steam. That's the best way to do it. Great. You can also check out our website, but our website is like desperately in need of an update, which is hopefully happening soon. I would say just search it on Steam. And if you join our Discord, which is just discord.gg/Prismata, there's usually people in there who have keys and are willing to give them away. If people ping me for a key, I think Who's Gaming Now might be doing a Prismata giveaway. If you go to the Who's Gaming Now Steam community, there's probably keys there. We're doing a free weekend sometime this month. Not sure when. Haven't announced it yet. We have a date in mind, but it's not 100% sure. And we do have like really good premium content too, if you just want to play like a cool single player campaign. So you don't have to get a free key. You could actually buy the game. We'd really like it.
Actually, I did play the second episode. Just came out this weekend, publicly, and I thought it was quite well done. You guys definitely have some good polish to that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So with that, that'll conclude things here. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, audience, for hanging out. You can find me, of course, in places such as the Twitter, on artifactacademy.com. Links to everything down in the description. Thanks for hanging out with us. Take care.
See you later.
So that was my interview, of course, with Elyot. If you stuck around for this long, I'm sure you enjoyed it, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did, though. I clearly had a lot of fun doing it. You're a very interesting guy with a lot of interesting thoughts on game design. You can find, of course, information in the description below, links to places that you can get a beta key, places where you can get in contact with myself or Elyot, and of course, also, if you have any feedback on the video, the interview, etc., please feel free to comment on either Reddit or in the description below. I'd love to have that feedback. But thank you so much for watching, and take care, everybody.